Hello, good evening and welcome to my humble model railway layout. Tonight we'll be looking at the locomotives of George Jackson Churchward. George Jackson Churchward was the chief mechanical engineer of the Great Western Railway between 1902 and 1922. He succeeded William Dean as chief mechanical engineer, and then once Churchward had retired, Charles Benjamin Coitts then became the chief mechanical engineer of the Great Western Railway. Now, Churchward was a Devon man, and so he had an association with the Great Western Railway, and certainly if he was a Devon man he would have understood the demands which would have been put upon a Great Western locomotive, certainly once they'd gone beyond Newton Abbot, where there were a series of three rather steep hills, or what they would call in railway terms banks, and that put great demands on locomotives. And certainly during Churchward's reign as chief mechanical engineer, there were greater demands put upon the locomotives due to increased train weights. There was also the need for speed and power. You needed to have the faster locomotives, and certainly be able to say you've got the most powerful locomotives, and that was a way of actually attracting passengers and getting the right kind of publicity. Now, the locomotive you can see go around tonight is what they call a mogul, which is a 260 locomotive, and that was designed by Churchward, and it's very, very successful design. I mean, they were built between the early 1900s right the way through to 1930, I think, in two batches, and over 300 were made. I think it was about 342 were built of these, and they carried on right the way through into BR service. So they're very, very successful locomotives. One you see go around now, if you look at talking about the model, is made by a company called Mainline. Mainline sadly stopped making locomotives in 1984 when the parent company Palitoy decided to leave the model railway business and carry on more profitable things like Star Wars toys. The actual manufacturer carried on under the name of Replica Railways, and you'll know them today as Bachmann. So that's and what happened to the actual brand once Palitoy sold off their interest. Now, very, very good locomotives these. I mean, you can pick these up, these moguls, for quite reasonable prices. I've noticed that with certain locomotives, certainly during the lockdown, the prices have been going up. And during the lockdown, a new version of this was actually released by a company called Dapol. But if you want one of those, you'll have to be paying well over £100 for one. They're very, very good models, and in fact I'm very, very tempted, but I've already got two moguls, mainline moguls, one in BR green and this one in BR black. And I've got this one running reasonably well. It's not perfect, but it does run well enough for my layout. Now what I'm going to do is we're going to run this one in, and we're having a look at some other locomotives as well for this evening's running. Tonight is April the 1st, 2021, and it's about 10 o'clock at night, so I'll be doing a very, very quick running session before we actually take this locomotive layout down. Now the mogul we're going to try to run into the siding. We had a little bit of trouble with the points earlier, so I'm hoping that we're going to get a successful drive into the siding, and then we're going to be talking about two other locomotives which were built by George Jackson Churchward. Okay, just one moment please, and we'll just slow her down. And then we'll just change the point over it. That's it. Then we'll see if we can get this one into the station. Straight in. Okay, that's fine, that's in there enough. Okay, and now you must bear in mind with the running of these modern locomotives is that obviously if they were built before 1984 they must be at least 36, 37 years old. But it's still going strong, it's still running. Now the next locomotive we're going to be looking at is a Saint class of locomotive. You may have seen it on other times. It's called St David, and let's have a look at her now and watch her going around the track. We're going to change the points away from their siding there. Okay, so here we go. And then we'll just change the points for the main line. Then we'll watch St David go around the track. We'll just move the cover around just slightly. Now, the Saint class of locomotive and the later Star class of locomotive came about as a result of a series of trials. Churchward brought over a couple of French locomotives, compound locomotives, which he wanted to actually have a look at their performance and find out if their designs were going to be useful for the Great Western Railway, or you can actually draw information about them. What he decided on these particular ones over the Saint class was that he would just go with a straightforward two-cylinder arrangement. The French locomotives which were brought over for trials were I think they were called 442s Atlantics, but they only obviously had two sets of driving wheels, and perhaps that was why he actually settled upon the 460 arrangement with the 6 driving wheels, and that would actually give the locomotive a lot more grip on the track, especially like I say, for going up over the Devon Hills. It was a very, very powerful locomotives, and they were very, very popular with the crews. They went right the way through from the early 1900s, again right through to nationalisation, and they were actually withdrawn by around about 1956, 1957. But by then, a lot of the locomotives had covered over 2 million miles. In fact, I believe St David had actually covered over 2 million miles. It was, but by the time it reached the end of its service, it was actually suggested that it would be preserved. But in fact, the Great Western Railway decided, or the Western Region of British Rail decided to actually let it go, and it went to scrap. And I don't think there are any Saint class of locomotives preserved. There is a railway society, I think it did Didcot, actually building a Saint class of locomotive out of various parts and remanufactured parts. I think it's going to be called Lady of Legends, so well, I think that's nearing completion now, so wait and see if that one comes out. But this is what they call a Saint class of locomotive, 2-cylinder 460. Meant for express engine works, and in fact they were only actually overshadowed by the Star class of locomotive, which were 4-cylinder locomotives, but they looked quite similar to these. Now the actual model you're looking at now is an interesting one. Is a Hornby model, and it was actually manufactured in about 1985. And for a 1985 locomotive, it's got some nice detail on it. I quite like this one actually. I was quite impressed with it. When I first got it, it was a little bit hesitant on the running, and in fact, if you don't run it for a long time, it does get a little bit hesitant at first on driving. It does take a little bit of warming up, but once running, you can see it runs beautifully. It's lovely. It's a tender-driven locomotive, and what that means is that the actual motor is in the tender, not in the locomotive itself. We'll just stop her and we'll just have a look. Just see. Ah, there we go. That's enough to tell you. If I point towards the tender, that's it there at the back. Okay. And in fact, you can spot a lot of the locomotives of the area built by Hornby that have got these tender drives, because they've got a rather high coal load in the actual bunkers, tenders, sorry, to actually accommodate the ring-filled motor. There's a ring-filled motor in these. Now, the ring-filled motor, I mean, it's been criticised by certain people, but I find it's a fine motor. It's perfectly reliable. It's got replaceable parts. You can still buy new parts for it right now. And in fact, I don't think I've ever actually really do anything to a ring-filled motor, to be honest. I don't remember doing anything to one except always putting some oil on the gears, and you know, on the actual spindle of the motor. They're perfect. I think this was made in 1985, and it's still running perfectly well. Excellent little locomotive. Again, it was bought during the lockdown, second hand on eBay. It came in for quite a good price. It was boxed and everything else. Very, very pleased with it. Very, very smooth and good over the points. Now, the next locomotive we'll be looking at is another one of Churchward's designs, and in some ways you could say it was well, certainly in today's terms how people regard it as controversial, but it's a little bit unfair to talk about the locomotive in either in a disparaging way. This next locomotive we're going to see, because they were withdrawn in 1930. There were reasons why they were withdrawn in 1930, which I'll go into when we actually see it go around the track. But this we'll just concentrate on just a few moments. I'm looking at our lovely Hornby St David. Now, personally, I don't see anything wrong with a tender drive locomotive. A lot of people say they prefer loco drive. Obviously, that's more realistic if you've got the actual electric motor in the locomotive itself. But to me, once it's going around the track, I'm not really fussy one way or another, to be honest with you. Now, as I've said in previous videos, if you're going to be buying a locomotive on eBay, because I think a lot of us can't afford to pay some of the prices of new ones. I mean, they're way over £100 for a new locomotive. Some are £200. Some are even going past the £200 mark now, which is an awful lot of money if you want to build up a collection. And so a lot of us have been actually looking at eBay. Now, obviously, somebody my age, I'm 63 now. I don't mind buying the older locomotives. These are the sort of ones which were around when I started the hobby. I didn't start my hobby really until I was in my early 30s. And that was only when I began to use the railways a lot in connection with my job. I got curious about railways. And then the interest all blossomed from there. But certainly, I must be honest with you, I had no interest in railways as a child. We didn't have much exposure to railways as a child. If we went on our family holiday, it would be battling our ways on a 30-mile journey to Breen, all of us piled into something like a Morris Minor. But anyway, that's another story, probably for another channel, not for the railways. So, like I say, I didn't really get interested until my early 30s, and then the hobby had a bit of a lull from about 2005. Just because we were in a smaller house, and there's really nowhere where I can put a railway up permanently. But my hobby got revived during the lockdown. I had to do something during the lockdown to maintain my sanity or some resemblance of it. So hopefully I've managed to do that. And I've been shielding really now because my 87-year-old father. So I've been. We've been shielding and being very, very careful. And these railways, my railway hobby has given me a lot of pleasure during this lockdown. I will be continuing with it beyond the lockdown itself. Now what we're going to do, we've run into 15 minutes now. So what we'll do is we'll be running our Saint class in, our lovely Saint David. But we'll just stop her at the signal at the top, there we go. And we'll bring her into the station. So if you just bear with me just one moment, please. Right, so we'll bring her forward now over the points and into the station. Really, really nice control on this one. I love this. As I've explained in previous videos, you do need sort of a relatively precise control, especially on a small layout like this. If I'm going to move the camera just to show you what I mean. These sidings end here, you can see our locomotives together there. St David, and the next locomotive we're just going to be going out, which is a 440 county class, another Churchward design, and we'll just bring her out now. I've just put the tripod down now, and we're just going to change the points and bring the county class out. Now the county class, they were quite interesting because they were brought in the early 1900s, and there were only 40 of them built, and they were built for more lightly laid railway lines where the Saint classes were not allowed, or the 460s were not allowed. Now basically what Churchward did, and this is something which the Great Western Railway did an awful lot, was that they used a lot of standard parts. They standardised a lot of their locomotives, and so that perhaps particular boilers, particular wheel sets would fit different types of locomotive. Just made it, I think it just made manufacture a lot easier. Now these 440s were shortened versions of these. So if you imagine, I mean, I've always looked at these, I mean, it may seem to be a pretty crude way of looking at these, but if you look at the Saint class there, that's a 460, so we've got the 4 leading wheels, 6 driving wheels, no trailing wheels under the cab, and this is a 440, and it's almost like they chopped off one of the pairs of wheels and sort of shortened the whole thing. That's what it seems to me. I mean, they've certainly got the same cylinder arrangement, and they were designed to have a similar amount of power to the Saint class, and they were in fact very powerful locomotives. These very often deputised for 460s, and I mean, I've managed to get hold of a book about the county class of locomotives because they're really a misunderstood class. I think they were only withdrawn in 1930 because there were so many locomotives being built by the Great Western Railway. There was already 300 odd moguls built under Churchward. There were only 40 of these, and there were the whole class of locomotive was coming out, the Grange class, and then in the end the Manor class of locomotive were being built, and those were 460s, and they were capable of going over the more lightly laid lines. They were sort of shrunken versions of 460s, shrunken versions of the of the castle class, and you know, you had the halls and the granges and the manors. Okay, so these may have become sort of surplus to requirements. They were known as Churchward's Rough Riders. Now, one of the reasons why that may have been was, of course, was because they had a much shorter wheelbase, but with a similar amount of power. And in fact, I can even see what's happening now with the model. As it comes down the track, it's got a slight wobble from side to side, because it's got a much shorter wheelbase than the Saint class or the Star class or any other locomotive. But they were very powerful and very capable locomotives, and in fact some of them covered over 1 million miles before they were withdrawn. So they had a relatively short life on the Great Western Railway. Some of them were only sort of 12 years old or so, 15 years old. Some were over 20 years old. Like I say, they covered over 1 million miles. And when you look at read the book I bought about them, in fact they were quite capable of keeping time on a lot of locomotives where, well, certainly on express trains, let's say, where they start to stand in for the 460s. Very, very capable locomotives. I'd say probably unfairly judged by a lot of people, because none of us ever actually would have seen these running, not in our living memory, or very few of us. I mean, 1930, when they were early 1930s when they were withdrawn, and but they're very nice as a model. This is a Hornby model, and this I think it's still available today, or you can certainly get them almost new on eBay. They were in the Hornby Railroad range. Now there's two different ranges in Hornby, and one is a sort of their sort of like high class range, which I cannot for life of me remember. I'm not that up to date with models, I must admit. But the railroad range is basically a less detailed locomotive built to a price, and I think they're also built to be more durable. And in fact, I've got a lot of time for this particular locomotive. There's a lot of detail in it that's actually moulded into the body and everything else, like, or into the smoke box, like the darts lever and everything else. But it's a very, very durable locomotive, and it runs very, very well. I'm very pleased with it. As you see, it's going around the track rather well. Now, what we're going to do tonight is we've obviously had a very, very sort of brief look at Churchward. There's going to be so much to talk about George Jackson Churchward. And all of the locomotive engineers of the Great Western Railway. Great tradition of locomotive engineers. The last one was Hawksworth, and then of course nationalisation of the British Rail came in, or British Railways, and the Great Western Railway ceased to be. It's back now as a private company, but it's nothing like what the Great Western Railway was. I mean, Swindon Works is long since closed, been demolished, or this. Well, it's part of it's there as a museum, I think, and they've got the some kind of shopping centre in there as well. But really, the Great Western, really, so in my view, the Great Western sort of went with the ending of the Western region of British Rail, the end of steam. I think the independence of it went when the diesel hydraulics were withdrawn and Swindon Works closed. But anyway, we'll go back to the glory days of our railways and the Great Western Railway. The 440. We'll have a look at the 440 in just a moment. We'll pull her in. Take a look. Okay, so we'll bring her in over here. That's it. Now we're going to be moving the camera and the tripod as a whole unit, so please bear with me if there's any jiggly moments. 440. 4 leading wheels you see there, and 4 driving wheels. 440 was a very, very popular layout for locomotives, certainly before the 460s came in. Other popular 440 designs would have been the Midland Railway 2P class 440 locomotives, which, if you talk about the West Country, the Midland Railway 440s give very, very great service on the Somerset and Dorset Joint Railway. That's a different subject again, and if I buy any S&D models, we'll be looking at those and talking about the Somerset and Dorset Railway. It's a subject I would like to cover, so I'm going to be looking at some S&D or Midland or Southern locomotives to expand my collection and expand my repertoire. So if you just bear with me just a moment, we'll just put the camera back. Right, okay, so that's it. Sorry about the jiggly work there. Now, we're going to end things tonight. For tonight, we've seen the 3 different locomotives, and I'm going to take my railway down now because it's a Thursday night, and question time is going to be coming on later on. So I'll be sitting there and probably getting quite wound up and start shouting at the telly, which I might actually film one evening, but I think if we did, me and Father watching Question Time, there were probably more bleeps than anything else. More words bleeped out. Anyway, but that's another subject for another day. I should bid you farewell for a good night. Thank you for watching my channel, and if you like what you see, press like and subscribe, and press the bell if you want to see more videos, and I will be certainly making more videos even when the lockdown comes to an end. Okay, and thanks for watching. Thank you very much, and good night.